Have you ever wondered why the world feels like it's accelerating, as if something unseen is counting down? An alien warned me. Earth's next reset is coming, and we're not ready. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was a message delivered in the dead of night, quiet, precise, and terrifyingly real. A warning about a cycle older than civilization, a shift that won't crush the planet, but will divide reality itself. And the signs are already unfolding around you, hidden in plain sight. Before we continue, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next videos, and tell me where you're listening from. Your engagement helps unlock the next part of this revelation. Let your mind settle for a moment. Your awareness sharpen, because what happened next is where the real story begins, and where everything you thought you understood starts to break open. Marcus Grant had always believed breakdowns happened to other people, the ones whose lives were visibly falling apart. His own life looked polished from the outside, structured and impressive. But on the night, everything snapped. That polished exterior cracked like thin glass. He lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, while the rest of the world slept. The clock beside his bed glowed 3:13 in the morning. For the 6th night in a row, sleep refused to come. His heart pounded with no clear trigger, and waves of panic rose and fell, as if responding to something he could not name. He told himself it was stress, exhaustion, too much caffeine, anything rational. But beneath those excuses pulsed a deeper truth that terrified him. Something was coming. Not a deadline at work or a crisis in his personal life, but something larger, something planetary. The feeling had stalked him for months, starting as a whisper he could ignore, then growing into a presence that followed him everywhere. It sat with him during meetings, lingered in the silence of his home, and coiled itself around every sleepless night like an invisible serpent. He tried grounding himself with logic, but the more he resisted the sensation, the stronger it became. It felt as if time was compressing, as if every passing day tightened an unseen noose around his awareness. He felt it in his bones, in the weight behind his eyes, in the electric static that prickled across his skin whenever he stepped into a dark room. Something was shifting in the background of reality, and Marcus sensed it the way animals sense storms long before the sky darkens. His life, once predictable, now felt like a house built on sand. The meetings, the emails, the carefully curated routine all seemed to lose their solidity, as if he were walking through a world slightly out of phase with itself. Even simple tasks felt dreamlike, disconnected, as though the ground beneath him was subtly vibrating. And in that quiet moment between breaths, Marcus realized what frightened him most. It was not the panic or the sleeplessness or the strange hum he sometimes imagined hearing. It was the possibility that this feeling of impending change was not imagined at all, but a warning his mind could not yet translate, a signal that reality itself was preparing to fracture. He lay still, listening to the silence, waiting for something he could not see but could undeniably feel. The following night, Marcus noticed something he could no longer dismiss as stress or lack of sleep. It began with the lights in his home flickering, not in the loose bulb way he had seen before, but in a rhythmic pattern, as if responding to an invisible signal moving through the walls. The soft glow brightened and dimmed with uncanny precision, and each pulse seemed to travel straight into his bones. He stood still, waiting for the electricity to stabilize, but the vibration beneath his skin continued long after the light steadied. It was subtle, almost like the tremor of distant machinery, yet he felt it with every breath. As the hours passed, the world around him started producing signs he could no longer rationalize. A repeated sequence of numbers appeared on his phone 3 times in one day. A song he had not heard since childhood played in 2 separate stores back to back. A stranger brushed past him on the street and whispered a phrase he had recently dreamed, a phrase so precise it sent a cold current through his spine. Marcus tried to convince himself these events were coincidences, but the pattern tightened with unnerving precision, forming a net he could not escape. The hum grew stronger that evening. It was not sound, but sensation. A low vibrational pressure spreading through the air like the subtle tension before a storm. Every object in his home felt charged, as if the space itself had become aware of him. When he placed his hand on the kitchen counter, he swore he felt a faint heartbeat pulsing beneath the surface. He pulled his hand away, but the phantom rhythm continued within his palm, echoing in perfect sync with the invisible hum filling the room. Reality around him felt unstable, as though the edges of his world were glitching. Colors appeared slightly too vivid. Shadows lingered in places where nothing stood. The silence had texture now, a quiet pressure that wrapped around his thoughts. Marcus had the unsettling impression that something behind the scenes of ordinary life was stirring, adjusting, preparing. He found himself listening, not with his ears, but with something deeper, something instinctual. The hum behind reality was not random. It felt intentional, almost communicative, as if the world he knew was thinning and another layer was pressing through. Marcus could not explain why, but he sensed that whatever was approaching had already noticed him. Marcus had lived long enough to know that electronics fail without warning, but what happened the next evening defied every explanation he reached for. He was moving through the house in a restless loop, trying to outrun the strange hum that had woven itself into the silence, when his phone suddenly froze in his hand. At that exact moment, the television in the living room flickered into stillness, and the laptop on his desk stopped mid-scroll. 3 devices, 3 different rooms, all seizing at the same second, as if obeying a single, unseen command. A symbol appeared on every screen. Marcus had never seen anything like it. It resembled an eye formed from intersecting spirals, with lines that pulsed faintly like veins glowing beneath skin. The shape seemed to shift while remaining perfectly still, as if it existed in more than one direction at once. He leaned closer, unsure whether it was pixelation, reflection, or something alive. The longer he stared, the more the room around him faded into the background until the symbol was the only thing that felt real. A strange awareness washed over him, sharpening everything to a painful clarity. His heartbeat grew impossibly loud, echoing through his ears like distant drums. The air felt thick, charged, as if gravity had tightened its grip. His thoughts slowed and aligned with an unfamiliar rhythm that did not feel like his own. It was as though something was tuning his mind, adjusting it to receive a message he had not asked for. The symbol pulsed again, brighter this time, and Marcus felt the vibration deep in his chest. It did not feel like technology. It felt intentional, almost intelligent, as though the image itself was watching him. Every detail around him became heightened. The hum that had lingered for days now resonated perfectly with the pulse on the screens, merging into a single frequency that filled the room with invisible pressure. Marcus could not move. He was suspended in a state between fear and fascination, unable to break eye contact with the shifting spirals. For a brief moment, he had the terrifying sensation that the symbol was not on the screens at all, but inside his mind, projected outward for him to recognize. The house, the furniture, the quiet night beyond the window all felt distant, like a dream dissolving. Something had reached out. Something had made contact. And Marcus knew this signal had not come from any human source. Marcus stepped outside that night not to find answers, but simply to escape the suffocating tension building inside his home. The air felt colder than usual, sharp against his skin, carrying a stillness that seemed unnatural for his quiet neighborhood. He walked without direction, hoping movement would dull the intrusive awareness that had settled in his mind ever since the symbol appeared. Yet with every step, the hum behind reality followed him, subtle but insistent, like an invisible thread tugging him forward. The streets were empty, washed in pale streetlight that flickered softly as he passed. Each flicker seemed timed to his breath, Each shadow shifted in ways that made him question whether they were reacting to the wind or to him. He turned down an alleyway he rarely noticed during the day, a narrow passage tucked between two aging brick buildings. Something drew him there. An unspoken pull, a quiet compulsion he could not resist. Halfway down the alley, the world changed. The air thickened, heavy and charged, as if he had stepped through a membrane separating one reality from another. The hum intensified until it became a vibration he could feel in his teeth. And then he saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the alley, motionless yet radiant, outlined by a soft light that did not come from any earthly source. The glow did not illuminate the walls or ground. It illuminated only itself, bending space in gentle ripples around its form. Marcus stopped breathing. The figure was humanoid, tall, slender, but unmistakably otherworldly. Its surface shimmered like liquid crystal, shifting subtly with each pulse of light. The face was not hidden, but its features were impossible to define, as if carved from pure awareness rather than matter. The alley, which moments ago had been familiar, now felt impossibly distant, replaced by something sacred and unsettling. Time stretched. Marcus felt both rooted to the ground and weightless, suspended between dread and recognition. The figure's presence was overwhelming, not threatening, but ancient, carrying an intelligence that pressed against his thoughts without touching them. Every instinct in him screamed to run, yet his body remained still, held by a force he could not see, but could feel with absolute clarity. He did not need an introduction. Something deep inside him already knew the truth. This was not a hallucination or a trick of the failing streetlights. This was contact, and the being standing before him was the one he would later know as Aureon. Marcus had no memory of deciding to step closer, yet he found himself standing only a few feet from the radiant figure, the alley around them fading into a blur of muted color. The air felt denser here, almost alive, as if it carried a presence far older than anything he had ever encountered. He felt an unfamiliar pressure behind his eyes, not painful, but insistent, as though something were gently tapping at the edges of his consciousness. Before he could form a single thought, the world inside his mind shifted. A voice entered him without sound. It was not heard through his ears, but through the deepest part of his awareness, speaking with a clarity more precise than any spoken language. It did not introduce itself. It simply revealed. In the span of a single breath, Marcus felt his entire life laid bare. Not the surface version he showed the world, but the hidden layers he never admitted to anyone, not even himself. His childhood loneliness, masked behind relentless achievement, the relentless pressure he placed on himself to appear composed while fearing he would never be enough. The silent panic that visited him every night, the emptiness that grew heavier each year despite every accomplishment he collected like fragile trophies. The voice did not judge, but it did not soften the truth either. It recited the moments Marcus avoided remembering, the decisions driven by fear instead of desire, the relationships he allowed to collapse because vulnerability felt too dangerous, the dreams he abandoned long before they had the chance to fail, the regret he carried like invisible weight in his chest. He felt each buried memory as if reliving it, not painfully, but unmistakably. Every lie he had told himself unraveled effortlessly under this presence. Marcus tried to shield himself instinctively, but there was nothing to shield. This being saw through him with the ease of reading an open page. It knew the insomnia was not physical, but spiritual. It knew the constant sense of urgency was not imagined, but a response to a shift he could not yet comprehend. The voice moved gently but firmly through each corner of his mind, leaving no space untouched. And with every revelation, Marcus felt something else rising within him, something foreign, yet somehow familiar. It was not fear, it was recognition. The certainty that this encounter was not the beginning of something strange, but the unveiling of something he had sensed his entire life without understanding. Marcus expected the presence in his mind to fade. But instead it deepened, settling into him with a calm so vast it felt almost cosmic. There were no spoken words, yet the meaning arrived with perfect precision, shaped not by language, but by understanding itself. The force that had exposed his inner life now shifted, revealing something far more unsettling than personal truth. It showed him the origin of the emptiness he had mistaken for anxiety, the unease he blamed on work, sleeplessness, or aging. The revelation entered him like a slow, steady pulse. What he felt was not illness, it was recognition. The presence explained that the dread pressing on his chest each night did not belong to the mind but to the soul, a sensory warning system tuned to movements in the fabric of reality. Marcus saw it in a way that was not quite sight, as though his consciousness expanded beyond the narrow limits of his body. He perceived a vast field of energy surrounding the earth, shimmering and shifting like a living aurora. It pulsed with increasing speed, rising in frequency, vibrating in ways the human nervous system was never meant to ignore. Humanity felt the shift as collective unrest, confusion, panic, and exhaustion. But beneath those symptoms lay something more profound. This was the beginning of a planetary reset. The presence showed him how souls responded to such changes long before the mind ever caught up. Insomnia, unexplained dread, emotional heaviness, and the sense that time was accelerating were not random disturbances. They were signals, as ancient as the cycles of the earth itself, warning that the current vibration of reality was nearing its peak. Marcus understood with absolute clarity that what he had been feeling was not a personal unraveling, but the early echo of a global transformation that most would mistake for chaos. The presence made it clear that this shift was not metaphorical. It was literal. The planet was approaching a culmination of energy that occurred only once every 26,000 years, a moment where consciousness split into divergent paths. Those attuned to fear would descend into deeper density. Those aligned with awareness would rise into a lighter realm. Marcus felt the truth of it resonate through every cell of his body. His sleepless nights had not been a disorder. They had been a summons. The reset was real, and it had already begun. The presence within Marcus expanded again, not in volume but in depth, pulling him into a silence that felt older than memory. In that silence, an image unfolded inside his mind, vast and intricate, as if the universe itself were revealing a blueprint long hidden behind the veil of ordinary perception. He saw the earth suspended in darkness, turning slowly like a luminous sphere surrounded by faint rings of shifting energy. These rings moved with a rhythm so precise it felt mathematical, yet alive, as if the planet breathed in cycles far beyond human reckoning. Aureon did not speak, yet the meaning flowed through Marcus with undeniable clarity. Earth did not move through time in a straight line. It moved in spirals, great cosmic loops that rose and fell like tides of consciousness. Every cycle carried lessons, endings, and beginnings woven together across millennia. And every so often, after a long ascent, the spiral reached a point of convergence, a moment when the vibration of the planet elevated so sharply that reality itself branched into separate paths. This convergence happened not every lifetime, not even every civilization, but only once every 26,000 years. Marcus felt the weight of that number press against his awareness. 26,000 years. Entire cultures had risen and vanished within spans smaller than that. Empires, languages, religions, all flickering like brief sparks compared to the enormity of this cycle. The presence showed him flashes of ancient worlds he did not recognize, but somehow understood. Civilizations that had sensed previous resets, some ascending into higher realms, others collapsing under the weight of their own density. Each split reshaped the destiny of every soul living at that moment. As the vision widened, Marcus saw the spiral nearing its apex now. The rings around the earth vibrated faster, glowing more intensely, As though the planet were preparing to shed an old skin, humanity felt the pressure without knowing the cause. The rising conflict, the polarization, the collective unrest, all symptoms of consciousness being pulled toward two divergent realities. Marcus sensed the truth with bone-deep certainty. The cycle was closing. The split was not a far future possibility but an approaching threshold. And every human, knowingly or not, was already choosing which branch of reality they would step into. The 26,000-year clock was striking its final moments, and there was no turning back. The vision shifted again, and Marcus felt himself sinking into a deeper layer of understanding. As though Aureon were peeling back the hidden meaning behind centuries of human fear. Images rose within his mind, not shown as memories but as revelations. Ancient manuscripts, crumbling scrolls, weathered stone tablets, and sacred texts from distant civilizations appeared before him. Each inscribed with warnings humanity had long interpreted as catastrophic endings. Fire raining from the sky, oceans swallowing continents, darkness devouring the sun. For generations, people had taken these words literally, imagining destruction as the final chapter of Earth's story. But Aureon's presence pressed into Marcus with a truth that dissolved every apocalyptic image like smoke. The end times were never about destruction, they were about division. The presence revealed that ancient cultures, more attuned to the rhythms of the earth, had witnessed previous resets. They lacked modern language for energy, frequency, or dimensional shifts, so they described what they saw in symbols and metaphors. A rising of light, a falling of darkness, a separation of worlds, two Earths occupying one space, each invisible to the other. Not physical extinction, but vibrational divergence. Marcus watched as the symbolic imagery transformed into something clearer. A single planet split into two overlapping spheres, one dense and shadowed, the other radiant and expanding. They remained intertwined, yet each carried its own trajectory, its own reality shaped by the consciousness of those within it. The ancient prophets, mystics, and seers could sense this split approaching but had no vocabulary to express the mechanics behind it. Their visions of disaster were attempts to describe the collapse of an old frequency as a new one rose to replace it. Aureon showed Marcus how humanity had misunderstood those warnings for thousands of years, believing an external event would destroy the world. In truth, the only thing ending was a vibrational era. The Earth was shedding a density it had carried for millennia, rising into a lighter state. For those aligned with that rising frequency, the shift would feel like awakening. For those anchored in fear, it would feel like breakdown. Marcus felt the revelation settle in him with a strange mix of awe and dread. The end times were never about the world ending. They were about the world dividing. And for the first time, he understood that humanity was not facing one future, but two. A heavy stillness settled inside Marcus's mind as the next revelation unfolded, darker and sharper than anything Aureon had shown him before. The vision around him shifted into a mosaic of images layered atop one another. Scenes from governments, corporate boardrooms, secret meetings, and digital networks pulsing like a nervous system stretched across the planet. Marcus realized he was not being shown fantasies. He was seeing what unfolded behind the curtain of public life, the hidden architecture shaping the world without the knowledge of those living in it. Aureon revealed that the approaching reset was not a secret to everyone. Certain groups had known for generations that the 26,000-year cycle was nearing its peak. Their ancestors had studied ancient records, decoded astronomical patterns, and inherited knowledge passed quietly through bloodlines and institutions. These elites did not fear the reset itself. They feared losing control. For them, the energetic shift threatened their entire structure of power, a structure dependent on humanity, remaining anchored in the densest frequency possible. Marcus felt the weight of that truth press against him. Fear was not an accidental byproduct of modern life. It was cultivated, fed, amplified, intentionally. Aureon showed him how news cycles were engineered to keep minds in survival mode, how endless conflict between groups was stoked to prevent unity, how distractions were designed to consume every moment of awareness. The goal was not to destroy humanity, but to bind it. A population drowning in fear could not rise to a higher frequency. It would remain locked in the lower timeline, the denser reality that gave those in power the advantage of predictability and control. Marcus saw how division served the purpose perfectly. Every argument, every tribal allegiance, every ideological war pulled consciousness downward, fracturing the collective into pieces too distracted to notice the subtle shift happening beneath it all. The elites understood the mechanics of the split. They knew that consciousness shaped the experience of reality itself, and so they worked tirelessly to ensure the majority would choose the heavier path without ever realizing they had a choice. Aureon's presence pulsed with quiet gravity. Marcus understood the warning with chilling clarity. The real danger was not the reset. It was being manipulated into sleepwalking into the lowest version of the future. A future designed not by fate, but by those who counted on humanity remaining blind. The world around Marcus dissolved once more, and what replaced it felt like a tapestry woven from every human emotion, every silent struggle, every restless night echoing across the planet. Aureon did not speak in words, yet the message flowed into Marcus with the weight of a revelation humanity had sensed but never fully understood. The shift was not coming. It was already happening, and the symptoms were everywhere for those willing to see them without the filters of habit or denial. Marcus felt himself rising above the earth, not physically, but in consciousness, as if hovering in a dimension where every human thought formed visible patterns. What he saw unsettled him. Waves of anxiety rippled across entire continents like invisible storms, pulsing through cities, homes, and individual minds. It was not isolated. It was global. Aureon revealed that this collective anxiety was not a failure of modern society, but the natural consequence of a paradigm collapsing under its own weight. The old world no longer vibrated in harmony with the frequency Earth was moving into. The dissonance created pressure, and humans felt it first in their nervous systems. Marcus saw depression rising like a shadow spreading across the planet. It acted not as an enemy, but as a signal that the structures people once relied on for meaning were losing coherence. The jobs that drained their spirits. The relationships built on convenience instead of connection. The endless pursuit of success without fulfillment. These constructs were breaking apart because they belonged to a lower frequency reality. Souls trapped inside them felt the collapse as hopelessness, not realizing that the despair was not a dead end, but an invitation to rise. Polarization appeared next, jagged and sharp, splitting communities, families, and nations like fractures in a cracking foundation. Marcus watched two opposing energies pulling away from each other with accelerating force. Aureon made him understand that polarization was not random conflict. It was the visible separation of frequencies as humanity sorted itself, unconsciously, into the two emerging realities. Those anchored in fear clung tighter to division. Those awakening to higher awareness gravitated toward unity. The friction between these two states manifested as chaos, confusion, and anger on a global scale. Then came the addictions, multiplying like symptoms of a spiritual famine. Marcus saw people numbing themselves with substances, screens, noise, constant stimulation. Aureon revealed that these behaviors were not weaknesses but attempts to drown out the rising pressure of the shift. The old paradigm was dying, and anything built on distraction could not survive the clarity that the new vibration demanded. The more the earth rose in frequency, the more unbearable it became for people to remain unconscious. Addiction was the shadow's final defense. The vision shifted again, showing Marcus millions drawn into cycles of overwork, consumption, escapism, or obsessive self-improvement. Yet, beneath the chaos, lay a deeper truth. All of these symptoms were signals that the third density reality was dissolving. The world people clung to was fading, not as punishment, but as evolution. Marcus felt Aureon's presence wrap gently around his awareness, urging him to see what most humans refuse to admit. The suffering was not proof that humanity was breaking. It was proof that humanity was outgrowing its old skin. And beneath the turbulence, something new was awakening. Marcus felt the atmosphere around him shift again, not violently, but with a slow, deliberate pull, as if reality itself were taking a deeper breath. What unfolded next did not come in images alone, but in layered sensations that bypassed language entirely. Aureon's presence guided him into a state where the boundaries of physical perception dissolved, allowing him to witness a truth that human minds were never taught to comprehend. The earth he knew appeared before him, suspended in twilight, its surface veiled by a shimmering field that pulsed with colors too subtle for ordinary sight. Yet beneath that serene image lay something far more complex, something no telescope or satellite could ever reveal. He watched as the planet seemed to split, not in physical form but in frequency, separating into two overlapping spheres that occupied the same space, yet moved at different rhythms. One sphere radiated a dense, muted vibration that felt heavy in Marcus's chest. Its surface was coated in grayish tones, not dead, but burdened, as if weighed down by fear, conflict, and unprocessed wounds collected across millennia. This was the familiar Earth, the one humanity had shaped with survival instincts, unconscious habits, and emotional scars that hardened into systems and structures. It was a world defined by scarcity thinking, competition, and the belief that life was a struggle against forces always threatening to collapse it. Beside it, intertwined but brighter, pulsed the second sphere. This Earth shimmered with higher frequencies, its colors vivid and alive, its surface rippling with patterns resembling flowing light. There was no sense of heaviness here, no tension. Instead, Marcus felt a gentle expansiveness, as though every breath taken within that version of reality opened pathways to deeper clarity. It was not a fantasy world or an escape from hardship. It was an elevated layer of the same planet, shaped by souls choosing awareness over fear, connection over control, presence over panic. Aureon made him understand, not through speech but through resonance, that these two Earths were not different planets. They were different timelines, different densities, different interpretations of the same space, created by the consciousness of those within them. Where a person vibrated, determined which Earth they would experience. And the split, though subtle at first, would grow more pronounced as the planetary frequency continued to rise. Marcus saw two groups of people walking down the same street, occupying the same physical space, yet living in completely different internal realities. The ones aligned with the dense Earth saw chaos, danger, hostility, and reasons to harden themselves. The ones aligned with the lighter Earth saw possibility, cooperation, synchronicity, and reasons to open. The split already existed in the human heart long before it manifested around them. Two Earths, one planet. Two futures, shaped by choice, unfolding simultaneously. Aureon's presence pressed gently into him, urging him to see the gravity of the revelation. Humanity was not waiting for the split. Humanity was living inside it. And every thought, every reaction, every fear, and every act of love nudged each person toward one Earth or the other. The division would not come with explosions or celestial signs. It would arrive quietly, through the frequency each soul chose to embody. Marcus felt a chill move through him. The world was not ending. It was dividing. And he would have to decide which Earth he would call home. Marcus felt the vision tighten around him, as though time itself were drawing closer, compressing into a narrow passageway. Aureon's presence shifted, becoming heavier, more deliberate, as if preparing him for a truth far more urgent than the ones that came before it. The shimmering images of the two Earths lingered in the background, vibrating in and out of each other like overlapping breaths. Then everything stilled, and Marcus sensed the weight of a countdown he never knew existed. The numbers entered his awareness with a clarity that made his pulse freeze. 2025 to 2033. Not as abstract dates on a calendar, but as a window carved into the fabric of reality, a period where the boundaries between the two Earths would thin to their most fragile state. Marcus saw it not as years, but as an energetic corridor, glowing with pressure and potential. The corridor pulsed like a heartbeat, each pulse growing faster as the planet approached it. Aureon revealed that humanity had already stepped into the earliest edge of this window. The turbulence sweeping across societies, the emotional volatility, the collective sense of something looming were not random storms. They were the first tremors of the shift. Marcus sensed how billions felt it without understanding, mistaking spiritual pressure for personal failure, global acceleration for individual anxiety. Humans believed they were breaking down, when in truth the world around them was breaking open. In the center of the corridor, he saw streams of energy branching in two directions. One spiraled downward, dense and shadowed, clinging to fear, division, and survival instincts. The other spiraled upward, bright and fluid, fed by awareness, compassion, presence, and the courage to let go of outdated identities. Most people moved unconsciously between these spirals every day, pulled by emotion rather than intention. But the window changed everything. During this 8-year span, every small choice carried amplified weight, shaping the trajectory of each soul with unprecedented speed. Marcus watched scenes from ordinary life flicker before him. A moment of anger pushing someone toward the denser spiral. A moment of empathy pulling another toward the lighter one. A fearful reaction anchoring a person to the old earth. A quiet act of kindness lifting another toward the new. It became clear that alignment was not determined by grand gestures or spiritual rituals. It was forged through repeated micro-decisions, thousands each day. What someone focused on, how they responded, what they feared, what they loved. These choices accumulated, forming an energetic signature that decided which Earth they would inhabit when the window closed. Marcus felt the gravity of the timeline settle into his chest. Humanity was not being judged. It was being sorted by resonance. Two realities coexisting, growing farther apart with every passing moment. The window was not a warning. It was an opportunity. A final chance to rise before the frequencies diverged completely. Aureon's presence pulsed beside him like a silent bell. The world was already shifting. The question now was whether Marcus would shift with it. The luminous corridor faded, and Marcus found himself surrounded by a silence that felt far more personal than anything Aureon had shown him so far. The visions of Earth, the cosmic cycles, the splitting timelines, all of it dissolved into a single, uncomfortable truth that pressed directly against his chest. The next revelation was not about humanity, it was about him. The air around him tightened, as though the space itself were preparing to expose something he had avoided for years. Aureon did not need to speak. The shift within Marcus began on its own, unfolding with the slow inevitability of a mirror being lifted to a face he was not ready to see. The vision that emerged was not cosmic or symbolic, it was painfully familiar. He saw himself moving through the routines of his everyday life, each moment illuminated with a clarity he wished he could look away from. He watched himself wake up each morning already tense, checking his phone before even breathing deeply once. Every notification pulled him into a vortex of fear, irritation, and comparison. He had always believed these habits were harmless, normal parts of modern life. But in the vision, each one emitted a dense vibration, anchoring him to the heavier earth. He watched himself rushing through his days, speaking without listening, reacting instead of responding, judging others silently for things he barely understood. Every complaint, every cynical thought, every moment he tightened his chest in annoyance or fear created a frequency that fed into the dense timeline. Marcus saw how often he worried about the future, how obsessively he replayed old mistakes, how rarely he allowed himself to inhabit the present moment. He had mistaken these patterns for personality traits, but the vision showed them as choices unconscious, repeated, and powerful. Aureon revealed more than Marcus wished to see. He witnessed how he avoided vulnerability in conversations, choosing safety over authenticity. He saw how he numbed discomfort with endless scrolling, late-night distractions, and tasks that offered stimulation but no nourishment. He watched himself disconnect from others out of habit, not malice, retreating into a shell built from years of unspoken fears. Each of these acts, small on their own, wove together into a vibrational tapestry that tethered him to the dense version of Earth. The most painful part came quietly. Marcus saw how often he chose fear when love could have been chosen instead. A moment when he withheld kindness because he felt awkward. A moment when he avoided a difficult conversation. A moment when he judged rather than understood. These micro-choices formed the pattern of a life aligned with the lowest frequency timeline. Not because he was cruel, but because he was unaware. A wave of heaviness washed through Marcus as he realized the truth. He had not simply drifted into the wrong timeline. He had built it, choice by choice, thought by thought. Aureon's presence remained steady, neither condemning nor comforting. The purpose of this vision was not punishment. It was awakening. Marcus saw clearly that the path he was on was not destiny, it was habit. And like any habit, it could be broken. But only if he faced it without looking away. The wrong timeline was not a place, it was a pattern. And Marcus, for the first time in his life, understood that he had the power to rewrite it. The air around Marcus thickened, and a cold heaviness pressed against him as Aureon shifted the vision into something far darker than anything he had been shown so far. The luminous corridors of possibility dissolved, replaced by an oppressive twilight that felt suffocating the moment it formed. Marcus sensed immediately that this was not a symbolic lesson or an abstract warning. This was a future, a possible version of Earth shaped entirely by the dense vibration he had unknowingly lived in for years. The dark timeline unfolded before him with a quiet dread that seeped under his skin. He found himself standing in the middle of a city he recognized by landmarks, but not by feeling. The familiar streets were washed in pale gray light, as though the sun itself had dimmed. Nothing was broken or visibly destroyed. Buildings still stood, cars still moved, people still walked, but everything felt stripped of vitality, as if color, sound, and warmth had been drained to the thinnest threads. Marcus immediately sensed the strangest thing of all: silence. Not literal silence, but emotional silence. A numbing void where human connection should have existed. People passed each other without a single glance, their expressions empty, their faces slackened by a weariness that went deeper than exhaustion. Marcus felt their inner worlds, each mind wrapped tightly around fear, survival, and distrust. Everyone moved quickly, not because they had somewhere urgent to be, but because slowing down meant feeling something, and feeling something meant remembering an ache they no longer knew how to face. He realized with a sickening twist that this timeline was not defined by violence, but by the absence of life. Aureon guided him deeper. Marcus saw towering screens, broadcasting warnings, rules, directives, each delivered in tones that mimicked guidance, but carried the weight of control. Governments were not tyrannies in the dramatic sense. They were structures built on the collective fear of the population. Systems that had grown more restrictive because people demanded it. Safety had become the highest god, and in worshiping it, humanity had traded away freedom piece by piece. Surveillance was not enforced, it was welcomed. The vision shifted to homes where people sat alone, not because they lacked others, but because connection had become too difficult to sustain. Hearts closed by years of emotional fatigue. Conversations replaced by passive consumption. No shared laughter. No spontaneous gatherings. No softness. The air in these homes felt cold even without winter. Marcus sensed that this timeline had starved itself of warmth long before it starved itself of hope. He saw children raised in this world, their eyes dimmer, their faces more guarded. They did not wonder or explore. They followed rules. They learned to fear uncertainty. They inherited the vibration of those before them, never knowing a version of Earth where joy was natural. Aureon revealed that in this timeline, depression was normal. Anxiety was constant. Creativity was nearly extinct. Humans were alive, but they were not living. The final scene tightened Marcus's chest. He saw himself walking through this world, older, numb, moving through routines without purpose, not hated, not harmed, simply forgotten by his own spirit. The realization hit him with brutal clarity. The dark timeline did not need fire or destruction to break humanity. It only needed people to stop feeling, stop questioning, stop choosing love. This was the future shaped by fear. Not dramatic, not explosive, but quietly devastating, like a candle slowly suffocating under a glass. Marcus felt Aureon withdraw slightly, giving him space to breathe, though breathing felt harder than before. He now understood the true danger. The darkest ending was not death. It was a life without light. And this was the timeline he had been drifting toward without ever knowing it. The bleak vision of the dense earth faded like smoke dissolving into open air, and Marcus felt Aureon's presence shift around him with a softness that contrasted sharply with the heaviness he had just endured. The darkness retreated, not abruptly, but as if gently pulled back by an unseen hand, revealing a new landscape rising beneath it. Light emerged first, not blinding or dramatic, but warm, steady, and alive. It touched Marcus like a memory he had forgotten, something ancient inside him stirring in recognition. The next vision formed slowly, almost reverently, as if the reality he was about to witness required a different kind of seeing. He found himself standing in the same city he had just watched crumble under numbness and fear. But now it looked transformed, not rebuilt, but reinterpreted by the consciousness of those living within it. The buildings were the same shapes, yet they emanated a subtle glow, as if the materials themselves vibrated at a higher frequency. The air felt lighter, clearer, carrying no trace of the suffocating heaviness of the dark timeline. Marcus breathed it in and felt an immediate shift inside himself, as though every cell recognized the resonance. People walked the streets, but their movements held ease rather than urgency. Conversations flowed with genuine presence, faces soft and open, eyes meeting with unforced warmth. Marcus felt the emotional currents within each person. Currents not driven by fear, but by awareness. These individuals were not perfect. They still felt challenge and sadness, but their pain did not calcify into isolation or despair. They processed it consciously, supported by a collective field that encouraged healing instead of suppression. Aureon guided Marcus deeper. He saw communities working together in ways that did not resemble the forced cooperation of the old world. There was no hierarchy of superiority, no need for dominance. Creativity flowed freely, manifesting in gardens growing along rooftops, murals that shimmered with symbolic meaning, and inventions powered not by extraction, but by intuitive understanding of natural energy. Technology existed, but it was an extension of consciousness, rather than a substitute for it. People did not consume to escape themselves. They created to express themselves. Marcus observed a group of children playing in a park, their laughter ringing with an unmistakable purity. They moved with unrestrained imagination, building structures not out of fear or competition, but out of instinctual joy. Their minds felt different, less fragmented, more connected, untouched by the emotional pollution of generations before. They carried the frequency of a world where trauma did not pass automatically from parent to child. He saw families who communicated not through defensiveness or wounded patterning, but through heart-centered awareness. They listened deeply. They spoke truthfully. They held space for one another without trying to control or fix. Marcus witnessed a simple moment between two strangers, exchanging a look filled with recognition, a silent acknowledgement that they shared the same collective intention to live consciously. Then the vision widened. Marcus saw nature thriving not untouched, but partnered with humanity. Forests integrated with cities, rivers flowing clean again, wildlife moving freely among human spaces without fear. The planet itself pulsed with vibrant energy, responding to the elevated frequency of those inhabiting it. Marcus could feel the heartbeat of this version of Earth, steady and rhythmic, aligned with the people who walked it. This world was not a utopia. People still faced challenges, but those challenges became catalysts rather than prisons. Intuition guided decisions more than fear. Creativity replaced consumption. Presence replaced panic. Connection replaced isolation. Marcus felt a surge of emotion rise in him: relief, longing, awe, as he realized this reality was not fantasy. It was a higher expression of the same planet, a timeline reachable not through escape, but through alignment. This was the world shaped by choosing awareness over fear, compassion over judgment, truth over avoidance. Aureon let Marcus stand there in silence, absorbing the resonance of this lighter earth. The message settled gently into him, like a seed. The future was not predetermined. The light timeline was as real as the dark one. And the world he would experience depended entirely on the choices he made next. The luminous world of the lighter earth faded slowly. As though retreating behind a curtain Marcus was not yet meant to walk through. Its glow lingered in his chest, pulsing softly like an echo of something his soul recognized, but his mind still struggled to comprehend. Aureon's presence shifted again, taking on a gravity that felt deeper than any revelation Marcus had encountered so far. The warmth of the vision dimmed, replaced by an almost solemn quiet. Marcus sensed he was being prepared for a truth that would dismantle many of humanity's oldest assumptions. The scene around him dissolved into a calm void, a space without form or time. In that emptiness, he felt Aureon's awareness settle over him like a mantle, heavy with meaning. And then the understanding came not in words, but in an unfiltered wave that struck with the force of honesty, stripped of every comforting illusion. No one was chosen. No one was guaranteed ascension. No belief system, no religious affiliation, no spiritual label held any inherent privilege. The universe did not operate on favoritism or divine selection. It responded only to frequency. Marcus felt the enormity of that truth ripple through him. For generations, humanity had clung to stories of salvation, chosen people, rituals that promised safety, doctrines that claimed exclusive access to higher realms. Aureon revealed how each of these narratives had been shaped by human fear, not cosmic law. The vision shifted slightly, showing Marcus countless individuals around the world. Some prayed with devotion, some attended ceremonies, some repeated affirmations or performed rituals. Others clung to philosophies, convinced that believing the right thing guaranteed a place in the higher timeline. But Aureon showed Marcus the deeper reality. None of these external acts mattered unless they altered the internal frequency from which a person lived. Words without embodiment carried no resonance. Rituals without transformation generated no elevation. Faith without conscious alignment did not shift vibration. Marcus felt humbled by the clarity. The universe was not transactional. There was nothing to appease, nothing to petition, nothing to impress. Every soul moved according to the frequency it cultivated through thousands of small choices made every single day. How one spoke, how one reacted, how one treated others when no one was looking, how one processed fear, how one loved. These were the true determinants of ascension. Aureon revealed that consciousness could not be deceived. A person could perform acts of kindness out of obligation or to appear virtuous, yet still vibrate from fear. Another could live quietly, imperfectly, making small efforts toward compassion, patience, and self-awareness, and rise naturally. Ascension was not a reward. It was a resonance match. Marcus saw moments from his own life, times he had acted lovingly, but from ego, and times he had acted clumsily, but from sincerity. He realized the universe weighed vibration, not performance. A single, genuine moment of compassion carried more elevation than 1,000 rehearsed gestures void of heart. A single shift from judgment to understanding had more power than hours of meditation done as ritual rather than intention. The void pulsed gently. Aureon showed Marcus that no external figure, no savior, no guru, no extraterrestrial, could lift someone into the lighter timeline against their will or without their participation. Free will was absolute. Even choosing not to choose was a choice. Even remaining in old patterns was a direction. Marcus felt the brutal beauty of that truth. The future was not predetermined. Ascension was not for the elite. It was not earned through worthiness. It was available to everyone, equally, consistently, and without judgment. But it required responsibility, personal accountability, the willingness to examine one's own patterns with honesty, the courage to choose love in moments when fear felt easier. Aureon's final message settled into the quiet. Ascension was not a destination for the chosen. It was a frequency available to anyone who decided, moment by moment, to rise. And Marcus understood that the only barrier between him and the light timeline was himself. The darkness around Marcus softened again, not into light, but into a stillness that felt almost sacred. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, preparing to reveal something that could shift the trajectory of a human life. Aureon's presence grew warmer, more focused, carrying a precision that Marcus sensed was deliberate. What was coming next was not metaphor or cosmic philosophy. It was instruction, practical, direct. The bridge between knowledge and transformation. Marcus felt a subtle current move through his mind, as if doors were being opened one by one. And then Aureon began showing him the truth that every awakened soul eventually faces. Ascension was built through daily choices so small that most people ignored their power. The universe did not change someone in a single moment of enlightenment. It changed them through repetition, intention, and consciousness woven into ordinary acts that accumulated into extraordinary transformation. The first lift came as a gentle wave, gratitude. Not the forced thanking of life for things he did not genuinely feel grateful for, but the quiet recognition of simple blessings that anchored him into the present moment. A warm bed, breath in his lungs, food on his table, someone who cared for him. Gratitude shifted vibration faster than almost anything else because it aligned awareness with abundance rather than lack. Marcus felt how even a few seconds of sincere appreciation softened the density inside him. Then came the second shift, heart-led speech. Aureon showed Marcus moments when he had spoken from ego, defensiveness, or old wounds, creating ripples of negativity that returned to him again and again. Words shaped reality like small spells cast unintentionally. Speaking from the heart, however, even in conflict, dismantled barriers and elevated his entire field. One conscious sentence spoken with compassion carried more power than hours of argument spoken from fear. The third instruction unfolded like a mirror turned inward. Emotional awareness. Marcus saw how often he reacted, automatically, anger, judgment, anxiety, without ever questioning the roots. Aureon made him understand that emotions were not commands, they were signals. Observing them without attaching to them created space for choice. In that space, vibration shifted. In that space, power lived. The fourth practice emerged as a vision of the earth herself. Nature connection, not grand pilgrimages or spiritual retreats. 5 minutes outside, bare feet on the ground, breathing with the wind, listening to the quiet intelligence of the natural world. Gaia was undergoing her own ascension, and connecting with her stabilized the frequency of anyone willing to pause long enough to feel her pulse. Then came the fifth principle, glowing with unexpected humility: anonymous service. Aureon showed Marcus that acts done without seeking praise dissolved ego faster than any ritual. Buying food for someone without them knowing, holding a door, offering kindness simply because it felt right. Service done in secrecy expanded the heart because it could not be hijacked by the desire to be seen. The sixth choice struck Marcus deeply: self-forgiveness. He saw how many times he had punished himself, replayed regrets, and chained his identity to past mistakes. Every moment of self-hatred anchored him to the dense timeline. Forgiveness did not excuse his past, it liberated his future. Aureon showed him that no soul could rise while dragging chains forged by its own judgment. And then, the final practice emerged, steady and luminous. Purpose-led action, not grand missions, not spiritual theatrics. Simple steps each day aligned with meaning, helping others, expressing creativity, guiding someone younger, choosing actions that reflected who he wished to become instead of who he feared he was. Together, these 7 choices formed a map, a frequency architecture capable of lifting a human being from survival consciousness into awakened living. Aureon let Marcus feel the truth of them, not as commandments, but as invitations. Practices that would change him, not through force, but through consistency. In the silence that followed, Marcus understood something profound. Ascension wasn't mystical. It was methodical. These 7 daily choices were the mechanics of transformation. And if he practiced them, not perfectly but sincerely, he would change his entire timeline. One choice at a time. One day at a time. The path was simple. And simplicity, Marcus realized, was the universe's most advanced technology. The teachings settled into Marcus like warm embers, glowing but fragile, vulnerable to the slightest wind of old habit. When the visions faded and the world around him returned to a grounded stillness, he expected to feel transformed, elevated, immune to the gravitational pull of his former self. Instead, the shift felt delicate, like a newly sprouted seed still wrapped in thin soil. Aureon had shown him the path, but walking it was something entirely different. The first cracks appeared almost immediately. Marcus felt the familiar rise of irritation when a memory surfaced of someone who had wronged him years before. The old reflex flared: anger, bitterness, judgment. It was shocking how quickly he slipped into the very frequency he had vowed to leave behind. His chest tightened, his breath shortened. The heaviness returned, and he thought for a moment that he had already failed. The glowing visions, the clarity of Aureon's presence, the strength he thought he had gained, they all seemed distant, like a dream evaporating at dawn. It was then that Aureon's presence pressed gently against his awareness, not to correct him, but to illuminate a deeper truth. Failure itself did not lower frequency. Self-judgment did. Every human carried patterns carved by years, decades, sometimes lifetimes of repetition. Expecting them to disappear overnight was not awakening, it was ego wearing a spiritual disguise. What determined a soul's trajectory was not whether it stumbled, but what it did immediately after. Marcus watched the emotion inside him from a new vantage point. Instead of drowning in shame for slipping back into anger, He tried to simply witness it. Anger rising, judgment forming, tension tightening. A reaction, not an identity. And in observing it, he felt a small crack appear in the automatic loop. A space. A moment in which he could choose again. That space was frequency. That space was evolution. Aureon allowed Marcus to relive the moment again and again. Every time he fell into an old pattern, the same window opened. Choose again. Not with force, not with denial, with awareness. That was the core of the new frequency. The willingness to return to alignment over and over until returning became as natural as breathing. Marcus saw scenes of his life as if through a cinematic lens, moments where he snapped at people he loved, times when he drowned discomfort with distractions, days when he spiraled into anxiety over things he couldn't control. He watched them not as failures, but as maps of where he had abandoned himself. Every lapse carried information. Every mistake revealed the next doorway. Every emotional spiral showed the exact point where he had believed fear more than truth. The revelation deepened. Aureon showed him countless humans across the world going through the same struggle. People waking up, slipping back into old patterns, then drowning in guilt for not being transformed fast enough. Guilt lowered frequency far faster than anger. Shame anchored the soul more tightly than any bad habit. But awareness, soft, patient, honest, lifted it every time. Marcus began to understand that growth was not linear. It was spiral-shaped. A looping ascent where old patterns resurfaced not to punish him, but to offer another chance to choose differently. The universe never condemned missteps. Only ego did. The universe only responded to the next choice. He practiced watching his thoughts without grabbing them. He practiced breathing through discomfort instead of reacting from it. He practiced forgiving himself moments after slipping into old habits. And imperceptibly at first, something shifted. The old patterns didn't vanish, but their grip weakened. The space between reaction and choice widened. For the first time, Marcus felt what ascension actually looked like in motion, not perfection, but persistence. Aureon's presence softened as Marcus absorbed the truth. Evolution was not about never falling. It was about learning to rise gently, again, and again, and again, until rising became the new frequency. The shift within Marcus unfolded quietly at first, almost imperceptibly. But the outer world noticed long before he did. As he practiced the choices Aureon had shown him, his frequency changed in subtle ways. A slower reaction here, a softened tone there, a silence where defensiveness once lived. But while his inner world grew steadier, the outer world began to quake. The truth of awakening revealed itself not in radiant enlightenment, but in the rearranging of relationships he once believed would last forever. It began with distance. Conversations that had once felt familiar now landed strangely in his body, as if he were speaking a language he no longer fully understood. Friends who thrived on complaining seemed heavier than before, their words thick with the density he was trying to escape. Marcus found himself listening rather than engaging, observing rather than reacting, and the distance widened without effort. The more present he became, the more absent he felt around those who clung to old patterns. The loneliness appeared like a shadow behind him, unexpected and cold. Awakening, Aureon had warned, was not a path lined with applause but with empty spaces where old versions of self were shed. Marcus felt it as he stepped away from conversations that drained him, from habits he no longer wished to feed, from people who felt increasingly like echoes of a life he was outgrowing. But with each step forward, a part of him wondered if he was losing more than he had to gain. Aureon showed him scenes of humanity in transition, people elevating their frequency and unintentionally drifting from those still anchored in old paradigms. It was not rejection, it was resonance. Frequencies that no longer matched could not hold. Relationships built on trauma bonds, shared negativity, or survival logic simply cracked as the vibration changed. Marcus saw this in his own life. A friend accusing him of being distant, another irritated by his newfound calm, someone else pulling away because he no longer fed their drama. The realizations hurt, not because he wanted to return to who he had been, but because he mourned the connections that had once felt grounding. Yet amid the fading, something unexpected bloomed. A few relationships deepened, quietly, naturally, without effort. His sister noticed the difference in his presence and opened up vulnerably in ways she never had. An old coworker, sensing the shift in him, reached out with curiosity instead of resistance. Even strangers began responding differently, as if his frequency communicated something before he spoke. These were not coincidences. Aureon revealed that when someone changes vibration, the universe rearranges their connections like stones in a river, forming new pathways where resonance flows without obstruction. Marcus learned that loneliness was not a punishment. It was a clearing, an energetic pruning that made space for the people aligned with his next chapter to find him. But the process required courage, the courage to endure silence without rushing back to familiarity, to let go without resentment, to trust that emptiness was not absence, but preparation. He watched versions of himself fall away: the people pleaser, the absorber of other people's pain, the man who stayed in draining conversations to avoid conflict, the one who measured worth through being needed. With each release, he found a deeper layer of himself, not built from identity or expectation, but from truth. The discovery was quiet, but profound. He had mistaken connection for attachment, loyalty for fear, comfort for alignment. The loneliness softened as he realized he was not losing people. He was losing versions of himself that had required them. And as those versions dissolved, he felt the faint but undeniable pull of something new emerging. He was not becoming someone different. He was finally becoming himself. The loneliness lingered in Marcus like a thin fog, not suffocating but present enough to make him question whether the path ahead would always feel so solitary. The more he shed old versions of himself, the more the world seemed to tilt into unfamiliar terrain. He wondered if awakening meant walking alone, if the cost of rising was permanent separation from the world he once belonged to. The silent void of that possibility pressed against him until Aureon shifted the vision around him once more. The darkness dissolved, giving way to a vast, intricate lattice of light suspended across the planet like an invisible web. It pulsed gently, alive with movement, shimmering with patterns Marcus could not decipher. Aureon's presence deepened, and an understanding slid into Marcus's awareness with the softness of a whispered revelation. He was not alone. The web expanded, revealing thousands of points scattered across continents. Each point represented a human being whose frequency had begun to shift. Some glowed brightly, their resonance steady and strong. Others flickered with uncertainty, dimming and brightening as they grappled with their own awakening. Millions more glimmered with faint, tentative light souls on the brink of remembering something they could not yet name. Aureon let Marcus feel their thoughts, not individually, but as a collective hum beneath the surface of global noise. People waking at inexplicable hours with a sense of urgency they could not rationalize. Individuals breaking down in supermarket aisles, not from despair, but because something inside them finally cracked open. Men and women quitting long-held jobs without understanding why, only knowing they could no longer live in misalignment. Parents looking at their children and questioning the systems they had once trusted blindly. Healers, teachers, scientists, artists, and ordinary people sensing an invisible shift, searching for meaning in places they never used to explore. This was the hidden army, not warriors in the traditional sense, but anchor points of consciousness. Souls who elevated the frequency of the planet simply by existing with awareness. They did not preach. They did not advertise themselves. They were often introverted, sensitive, misunderstood. They felt the world's pain more deeply than others, not because they were weak, but because they were attuned to the collective vibration. Many believed something was wrong with them, when in truth, something was awakening within them. Aureon revealed that these individuals served as stabilizers during the transition. Each awakened heart acted like a tuning fork, synchronizing subtle fields around them, influencing families, communities, and environments without speaking a word. Their presence alone shifted probability lines. Every time they chose compassion over fear, patience over reaction, truth over avoidance, they strengthened the lattice of light surrounding Earth. Their choices rippled outward, touching those not yet aware they were being touched. Marcus saw scenes of these hidden awakeners across the world: a woman in Tokyo comforting a stranger on a train, a teenager in Lagos choosing forgiveness instead of retaliation, a father in Sao Paulo meditating before dawn, unaware that his calm influenced his entire household, a nurse in Toronto offering genuine presence to a dying patient, a grandmother in Manila praying not out of fear, but out of unconditional love. Individuals scattered across continents, never meeting, never knowing one another, yet connected through a resonance older than civilization. Their lights formed constellations on Earth's surface, constellations that Aureon revealed to be the scaffolding of the ascending timeline. Marcus felt his chest tighten. For the first time since his awakening began, the loneliness loosened its grip. He understood now that he was part of something vast, something quiet but powerful. The hidden army did not march. It vibrated. It anchored. It held space for a world that was dissolving and a world that was emerging at the same time. Aureon's final truth settled through him like a deep exhale. Awakening was never meant to be done alone. It only felt lonely until one learned to see with higher vision. In the unseen, in the subtle, in the energetic, millions were rising together. Marcus was not solitary. He was surrounded. He was one of many, and the hidden army was already changing the world. The world around Marcus dimmed again, not into darkness, but into a profound quiet that felt older than memory itself. Aureon's presence grew heavier, more deliberate, as if the next revelation required not only attention but surrender. Marcus sensed the shift immediately. This was not another explanation or teaching. This was the unveiling of what awaited him and all of humanity depending on the choices made from this moment forward. The stillness cracked open. A landscape stretched before him, split cleanly into two vast paths that ran parallel yet led to entirely different destinies. They did not represent good or evil, reward or punishment. They represented frequency, consequence, alignment. Aureon did not speak. He didn't need to. The first road unfolded before Marcus like a familiar ache returning. It shimmered with a dull gray haze, heavy and thick, the air vibrating with the static of unresolved fear. This was the continuation of the sleepy world Marcus had lived in for years, a world guided by autopilot decisions, unconscious reactions, and inherited beliefs never questioned. Marcus felt the tug of that path. It carried the gravitational pull of old routines, ego comforts, and the seductive illusion of safety. He saw himself there, not dramatically broken, not catastrophically ruined, just slowly sinking. A life of half-presence, days spent scrolling, numbing, distracting, relationships strained by emotional absence, anxiety tightening around his chest like invisible coils. The same arguments repeated, the same regrets resurfacing, the same yearning growing louder as the soul's calling went unanswered. He aged in that timeline not violently, but hollowly. A man who remained asleep long after the alarm had sounded. Around him, society in that timeline thickened into density. People speaking louder but understanding less. Communities fractured by fear. technology replacing connection, exhaustion becoming a universal language. Not an apocalypse, something worse. A slow forgetting of what it meant to be fully alive. Marcus felt the weight of that existence, a heaviness that seeped into the bones. Then the second road emerged beside the first. It did not shimmer with perfection. It did not promise eternal bliss, but it radiated a clarity that pierced straight through Marcus's chest. The air on this path felt alive, almost electric, vibrating with a frequency that resonated with the deepest part of him. A soft light pulsed along the horizon as if consciousness itself was illuminating the way. He saw a version of himself walking there, steady, grounded, awakened. A man who lived with intention instead of impulse. Someone who paused before speaking, breathed before reacting, listened before assuming. His relationships deepened, not because others changed, but because he did. His days unfolded with meaning, even in small routines. He found creativity where boredom once lived, intuition where anxiety once dominated, peace where restlessness used to rule. This timeline showed a world rising with him, individuals becoming more present, families reconnecting, communities rebuilding themselves around cooperation instead of fear, inspiration spreading quietly through everyday choices, a civilization slowly remembering its own light. Marcus felt the difference viscerally. One path depleted him, the other expanded him. Aureon's presence pressed gently at his back, urging him to look deeper. The two roads were not distant futures. They were probabilities, shifting moment by moment, shaped by decisions as small as a single breath, a single thought, a single choice between fear and love. Marcus understood that neither road appeared suddenly. They emerged through accumulation, through consistency, through the vibrational momentum of daily living. He saw himself standing at the very beginning of both possibilities, one foot on each timeline, feeling both pulls, hearing both calls, and for the first time, he comprehended the real meaning of free will. Not the freedom to choose once, dramatically and heroically, but the freedom to choose repeatedly, quietly, relentlessly, until one road became the only road. Aureon didn't warn him which path was easier. He simply showed the truth. The higher road demanded effort, presence, honesty, and courage. The lower road required nothing at all, just inertia. Marcus felt the vision tightening around his chest. The future was not waiting for him. It was responding to him. And the fork between the two roads was not 8 years away. It was here, right now, in every moment of his becoming. One path meant sleeping deeper. The other meant waking fully. And the choice, Aureon revealed, was entirely his. The two roads dissolved into mist, leaving Marcus suspended once more in that vast, quiet expanse where every truth felt amplified. The silence was not empty. It was dense with meaning, humming with an unspoken message Marcus sensed, but did not yet understand. Aureon's presence shifted, becoming sharper, more precise, like a blade honed for a single purpose. Marcus felt it immediately. This was the moment where his last illusions would be stripped away. A faint tremor passed through him. Despite everything he had seen, a part of him still clung to a final hesitation, a quiet voice whispering that maybe he didn't have to start yet. Maybe he could wait for something bigger, something undeniable, something dramatic enough to force him into change without requiring courage. A global event, a mass awakening, a cosmic intervention so unmistakable that no one could question it. Aureon sensed the thought before Marcus had even fully formed it. The vision sharpened, surrounding Marcus with images he did not want to face. People around the world waiting for signs, waiting for miracles, waiting for the skies to open, for governments to announce disclosure, for prophets to appear, for the world to scream loud enough to make awakening effortless, waiting for someone else to take responsibility for their evolution. waiting for certainty so complete, it removed the need for choice. Aureon's presence pressed into Marcus's awareness, like a firm hand guiding him to look closer. Marcus saw individuals begging for proof but ignoring synchronicities. People praying for change but avoiding inner transformation. Souls sensing the urgency but pretending the feeling would pass. A species asking for awakening but refusing to participate in it. Then the truth landed inside Marcus with absolute clarity. No bigger sign was coming. Aureon let Marcus feel the depth of that truth, not as judgment, but as liberation. Humanity was waiting for an external event to force ascension, when ascension had always been an internal process. People imagined a cosmic announcement, a worldwide shift, a dramatic revelation that would make the choice for them. But the universe did not work that way. It never had. Ascension was subtle by design. Quiet, personal, invisible to the untrained eye, loud enough for the soul, silent enough for free will. If the universe forced awakening through spectacle, it would remove the very essence of conscious evolution. Choice mattered because it was voluntary, not coerced. Marcus felt the weight of his own excuses dissolving, one by one. The idea that he was waiting for confirmation, the hope that something external would push him forward, the wish for a world-changing moment that would make everything obvious. Aureon dismantled each illusion with ruthless compassion. The sign was already here. It had come in his insomnia, in his dread, in the synchronicities that lined his days. It had come in the breaking of his old identity. It had come in the loneliness, the emptiness, the unanswered longing that pulled him toward something he could not name. It had come in the luminous figure standing in the alleyway. It had come in every truth Aureon had revealed. This conversation was the miracle. This moment was the announcement. This encounter was the cosmic intervention he thought he was waiting for. Marcus felt the truth permeate his entire being. He realized that waiting was just another form of fear dressed as patience. It was a way to postpone responsibility while pretending to seek clarity. The universe had not withheld a sign. Marcus had simply refused to recognize the signs already given. Aureon's presence softened, becoming almost tender as the final revelation settled. No bigger sign was coming because none was needed. Marcus was awake. Now came the only question that mattered. Would he act like it? The silence around him deepened, no longer heavy but expectant, like the pause between lightning and thunder. And Marcus understood that the next step would not be shown to him. He had to take it himself. When the visions dissolved and Aureon's presence faded into the quiet pulse of the night, Marcus found himself standing once more in the physical world. The cool air moved across his skin, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and city lights. It should have felt ordinary. Instead, every sensation vibrated with new meaning, as if the world itself had sharpened into higher definition. Nothing external had changed, yet everything felt different because he had changed. The silence thickened around him, not empty but charged, like the universe waiting to see what he would do now that he could no longer pretend he didn't know. He walked home slowly, feeling the weight of the truth pressing deeper with each step. The window was real. The timeline split was real. The consequences of inaction were real. And the most unsettling part was not the cosmic scale of what he had learned, but the personal responsibility it demanded. There was no savior coming, no collective miracle, no dramatic global awakening designed to drag him into alignment. The shift would happen quietly, the way tectonic plates move, unseen until the landscape is forever changed. In the following days, Marcus felt the world differently. He noticed the collective anxiety woven into conversations at the grocery store. He sensed the heaviness behind people's eyes, as if everyone were carrying a pressure they didn't know how to name. He saw the polarization Aureon had shown him playing out everywhere. Families splitting over ideas, friends drifting apart. strangers erupting into anger over insignificant triggers. It was all there, hiding in plain sight, signs of a world approaching the threshold. And slowly, a new impulse rose in him. It was not fear, it was not urgency. It was something quieter and more determined. Marcus realized he could not keep this to himself. The message was never meant for him alone. Aureon had shown him what humanity needed to see, but would never believe unless another human echoed it in words they could grasp. The warning was not a prophecy, it was a door. And doors meant nothing if no one walked through them. So he began speaking, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the measured conviction of someone who had seen what lies on both sides of the future. He talked to people who felt lost, people who woke up at 3 a.m. with dread in their chest, people who sensed something coming but had no language for it, people exhausted by chaos, yet feeling strangely called towards something higher. He didn't overwhelm them with cosmic details. He simply told the truth that mattered most. The feeling inside them was not madness. It was awakening. Word spread quietly. A few listened. A few dismissed him. But those who heard him felt something shift. Not because Marcus was persuasive, but because truth resonates even when spoken softly. At last, Marcus understood what Aureon meant by the hidden army. It was not about gathering followers. It was about activating awareness, one person at a time, one choice at a time, a frequency spreading like ripples across water. And now he speaks to you. Because if you are hearing this, if something in your chest tightens with recognition, if a part of you has always sensed that the world is moving toward a moment where timelines diverge, then this message has reached you at the precise moment it was meant to. You are not imagining the urgency. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are awakening. And the window is open now, not forever. Your timeline is shaped not by belief or fear or ritual, but by the frequency of your daily choices. Every thought, every reaction, every moment you choose presence instead of distraction, compassion instead of judgment, courage instead of avoidance. These choices are not small. They are alignment. They are direction. They are destiny in motion. No bigger sign is coming. No louder announcement will arrive. You are the sign. Your discomfort is the announcement. Your curiosity is the invitation. Marcus's final message echoes through the quiet. Choose now. Choose intentionally. Choose repeatedly. The road you walk after the reset will be the one you build through the choices you make today. 2 futures are already forming, and only you can decide which one becomes yours.